Hello and welcome to another edition of the CFB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. The niche sports connoisseur is here. We are back at it. The Super Show continues our summer preview series of the college football conferences. This week, we will be covering the American Athletic Conference, the AAC. We are working our way through. This will now be our fifth preview for those keeping track at home. And we're going to have all of these shows available on demand on our YouTube page. We've covered the MAC, the MWC, the CUSA, and the Sun Belt. Wrapping it up here, we'll be doing the AAC, and then we're getting into SEC, Big 12, and Big 10. Let's go. If you don't know already, at DubDeuces85 on all social media platforms is where you can find me at FTN Fantasy, FTNFantasy.com. We have all kinds of things going on right now. We're doing the daily WNBA grind from a betting and DFS perspective. The Olympics are right around the corner. Just saw that USA versus Canada, exhibition game here tonight. A TBT tournament is starting, and of course, we are into Summer League. Summer League props have been going on, and we're going to have our first Summer League slate here on Friday, just a couple of days away, just like 1 day away. So lots of fun stuff happening here at FTN. Get yourself ready. And when it comes to college football DFS, what you're really excited for, we are just over a month away. Can you believe it? I can't. It goes by so fast. It's exciting. I'm ready. Let's get into this conference preview. Let's talk about the AAC. All right, we're going to start with the Army Black Knights. And as I've been doing week after week, talking about win projection totals, that'll be from FanDuel Sportsbook. We'll be referencing those again and giving our opinion on the over or the under. All right, so Army. First time in 20 years, Army's going to be part of a conference. They've been doing the independent thing since 2005. Good move for them. I think this is a great move for stability. When you're an independent team, you have to schedule all over the country. You're playing teams, subpar, way too good for you. Like, there's just a lot of instability there. And this is going to be a lot better for them here playing in a conference. They are projected at 5.5 wins per FanDuel. I think the under has got to be in consideration here. Now, Jeff Monken's group, they have a good schedule, a very soft schedule. They won't be playing Tulane. They won't be playing Memphis, and they won't be playing South Florida. 3 teams who should be rather strong in this conference. So an easier schedule, 6 wins and bowl eligibility is definitely a real possibility. But I will believe it when I see it when it comes to this Army team. Of course, we know they run the vaunted triple option Service Academy. Who's going to be at quarterback? Bryson Daly, 913 passing yards and 7 touchdowns. That's a metric S-ton for a triple option quarterback. 901 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. When it comes to running backs, there's going to be a plethora of them. They will run 5, 6, 7 deep. They've got the H-back. They've got all these different spots. The top returner, statistically speaking, is Kanye Udo, who rushed for 524 yards. Tyrell Robinson, 187, and Hayden Reed, 200. 2 different receivers eclipsed 200 yards last year for Army. Noah Short, 18 catches, 252 yards, and 2 scores. And Casey Reynolds, 16 catches, 237 yards, and no touchdowns. That's what I have to say about Army. I will not be taking the over. I do not believe in Army, but I am happy that they're back in a conference. The Charlotte 49ers, a lowly total here of only 3.5. Now, I like head coach Biff Poggi. I think he's fantastic. The Niners are going to have a top-tier defense coming into it. I know when we're talking about DFS and sports betting and glamorizing and doing these previews, we're very focused on offense because that's what we really have to pay attention to. That's how we make our money. That's what we do, right? But defense, it's good to know that as well. And I got to tell you, the 49ers defense, it's going to be rather stout. The problem here is offensively, are they going to have enough pieces coming in to be able to keep up here and score actual points when their defense is holding teams, to 14, 20, 22, 27 points like they were doing last year. They just didn't have the offensive chops to do much of anything when it came to scoring. I do like the over 3.5 for Charlotte. It's a little bit, wild, I guess. People aren't going to be really looking to Charlotte to win many games, but I do think they're a team that can pull 5-6 wins here. I really do. At quarterback, we're going to be looking at Trexler Ivy. He's the primary returner, 1,200 yards, 4 touchdowns. But he got picked off 10 times. Not great. Jalen Jones, who was quarterback for them, bounced around different Florida schools, converted to a wide receiver as he's playing at the professional level now. And they are bringing in a Florida transfer by the name of Max Brown there to compete with Ivy. So quarterback, not great. Where they're going to be stout, I think, is the running game. Running game, defense, physical, that's going to be this team's hallmark. Hashawn Wilson is the primary returner, 322 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, but they're also bringing in a relatively stout runner in Cartavius Norton from Iowa State. So that'll be a two-headed monster backfield there between Wilson and Norton. I definitely like that. And also at receiver, bringing in former North Carolina and Middle Tennessee transfer Justin Olson. Caught about 450 yards last year for Middle Tennessee. Wasn't really used that much for North Carolina, but had the chops to get recruited there. So that's a big deal. And their top returner is Jarris Mack, 453 yards and 2 touchdowns. Look out for Charlotte. I think they're a sneaky squad. Not going to sit here and say they're going to win the conference or anything crazy like that, but I think they can win more than 3.5 games. Let's go, Biff. All right, East Carolina, the Pirates, the total of 6.5. It's a no bet for me. I'm not too confident in the under, but I'm also not too confident in the over. Coach Mike Houston does have a major rebuild on his hands. Last year's team filled with seniors, both sides of the ball. Quarterback-wise, they've got Kattenhauser coming in there from Michigan State. Played a little bit here or there. Jake Garcia, who spent time with Missouri and Miami, has the pedigree there. Those two are going to be competing for the QB1 job. They do have stability at running back as Marlon Gunn, a Jake Kuchek special, and Rajay Harris both back as the 1-2-headed monster there. And at receiver, they're bringing in a plethora of transfers. Their top returner is back in Chase Sowell, 47 catches, 622 yards, and a touchdown for Soul. And then they bring in Casey Kelly, formerly of Oregon and Ole Miss, Winston Wright of FSU and West Virginia, and Anthony Smith of NC State. So there are some pieces here for ECU, and I do feel like Mike Houston is a relatively good coach. The nice thing about the transfer portal era, it giveth. The negative side is it taketh, but when you lose guys, you can go out and get guys, which speeds up these rebuilds. In the past, say 10 years ago, with what ECU lost, you would be looking at a possible 2 to 3 year rebuild at best. At worst, we're talking 5 years. But with the transfer portal at hand, you can quickly rebuild, and Vegas giving them a little bit of respect there with 6.5 wins. Will they end up being bowl eligible? I think they will, but 5 to 6 wins seems like a safe mark, but not safe enough for me to bet one way or another. The FAU Owls, Florida Atlantic, we're a little aggressive here, 6.5 wins per FanDuel. Now, FAU hasn't had a winning season in the past 4 years since the transfer portal master himself, Lane Kiffin, took the Ole Miss job. When Lane Kiffin was at FAU, he was balling out of control, right? That team was winning games left and right. They were a very, very good program under Kiffin. There's reason to believe their current coach, Tom Herman, can have them bowl bound and possibly getting one of their first winning seasons in nearly a half decade. They have a favorable schedule, much like Army. They won't have to play Memphis or Tulane, two of the best teams in this conference, and they have to face just 2 teams overall in their entire schedule that were bowl eligible last year, that being UTSA, the Roadrunners, and South Florida. So a favorable schedule there for FAU. Can they eke out 7 wins? It's definitely possible. But they have a lot of replacements to have. Larry McCammon gone, their best running back. LeJonte Weister is off to Colorado to go do some big things, put up some video game-esque numbers. At quarterback, Cam Fancher comes in from Marshall, a capable quarterback to be certain. At the running back spot, CJ Campbell, a little used FSU transfer, and their on paper top returner, Zuberi Mobley, but he was buried on the depth chart last year. So not a lot of experience in the running game there. At receiver, they do bring in some guys with collegiate pedigree in terms of, hey, these guys played at other schools that are known for their football. Caleb Coombs transferring in from Marshall, Milan Tucker from Appy State, Dom Henry from BYU, and Marlon Johnson, from Buffalo. None of those names are particularly exciting. One of those names will work out and become the WR1. We'll see how that shakes out. I just am not that excited about this FAU offense, and I feel like there's going to be problems with them scoring. Someone's obviously going to come out of this team and be a DFS hero for us, but it's hard to say just who that'll be yet. I do not think this is a good spot to bet the over 6.5 wins for FAU. I would be a solid under bet for them winning 5 games max, even with the easier schedule. All right, the Memphis Tigers, the creme de la creme. This is the team projected at 9.5 wins. They're going to win 10-plus games. You can take the over if you want to. Ryan Silverfield's club is awesome. This is a team that loses out Blake Watson. He was an absolute star, 1,000-yard rusher, great receiver. Whenever Memphis was on the slate, it was basically, hey, we got to pay $7K plus for Blake Watson because we know he's going to give us 25-plus fantasy points, and he did each and every game. Without him, that's tough, but they still have an enormous amount of talent that is returning and a couple of guys coming in who are definitely intriguing. They had an 11-3 season last year, so seeing the 9.5 win total, I mean, to me, that's just a juicy over. I don't foresee this Memphis team losing enough games where they don't hit the over. Their 3 losses last year, it's worth noting, I wanted to point this out, were to Missouri, SMU, and Tulane. All 3 of those teams won 10-plus games a season ago. So their losses were to semi-elite teams. All right. This is a real threat. They're going to be a team that is, viable for the new format, the 12-team playoff. There's some guaranteed bids out there for, I believe, 5 conferences. Pac-12 is dead, of course. There's just the 2 teams there that are playing in other, Mountain West and other stuff. So there's a real good shot for the AAC winner to get a playoff bid, and that, for my money, is going to be a 10-win plus team in Memphis. Seth Hennigan is back, all-star, superstar of a quarterback, 3,800 passing yards a season ago. He also rushed for 275, and he scored a total of 37 touchdowns, 32 through the air, and 5 on the ground. Seth Hennigan is our dude. He'll be priced up. He's an 8K type of quarterback. A lot of people kind of, feel weird about paying for him. This is a discussion we had a lot last year because maybe his rushing upside isn't always there, but if he's going to rush for 305 on the ground, I'm more than willing to pay up for him each and every week, especially when conference play begins. At running back, they do have Sutton Smith and Brandon Thomas returning, both capable runners that have been around the program for a bit. With Blake Watson out, there's going to definitely be some carries opening up. Just 2-3 years ago, Brandon Thomas looked like he was going to be a future NFL back, and certified RB1, best guy on Memphis, and a total dynasty star. It hasn't worked out that way. Ineffectiveness, injuries, things have happened. Now, he's not going to step into a bell cow situation because the team does bring in Mario Anderson, a transfer from South Carolina that rushed for 700 yards last year in the SEC. He's going to be the primary replacement for Blake Watson, and it wouldn't shock me to see Anderson become a 1,000-yard rusher because of it. I do think Smith and Thomas are going to factor in, but Anderson should get a heavy, heavy workload and also factor in as a receiver there, much like what we saw out of Watson last year. Remember the name Mario Anderson. I feel like he's going to be underpriced when we go into the season, even with that SEC pedigree. At receiver, we have a embarrassment of riches. Our guy, Rock Taylor, is back, 1,000-yard receiver. Demir Blankumsey, 901 yards, 7 touchdowns. You remember last year, it took 6, 7, almost 8 weeks for the DFS sites, namely DraftKings, to price those guys appropriately. we had Demir Blankhamsey at, sub 5K for half the season, if not more. Rock Taylor, he got up to 6K relatively quick, but he still wasn't priced appropriately for most of the season. And you're talking about an offense that supported 1,900 yards across two players. Kobe Drake is back, 350 yards. They have a transfer coming in Jacoby Banks from Houston. I think he'll be a factor. And then also Jair Shorter, a name you may have heard of throughout the past 7 seasons. Yes, that's right. He has played now 6 seasons, going into his 7th. He started at North Texas, played many years there, went to Auburn last year. Unfortunately, his career has been riddled with injuries, but he does have talent, skill, pedigree. The kid can play. He just needs to stay healthy, and you insert him into this really fun offense next to Rock Taylor and Demir, where defenses are going to be paying attention to those guys. Shorter has an opportunity here to kind of slide into that WR3 role, much like Kobe Drake did, WR3, borderline WR4, and put up some pretty nice stats on a week-to-week basis. So Jair Shorter, a min price special in the beginning of the season, very, very possible. He has not been practicing as much in the spring, still dealing with some ailments, so we'll see, but definitely a name I want to be paying attention to as the season begins. Navy, the midshipman, 5.5 wins. Another service academy here. It's been a pretty rough patch for Navy. I don't know if this is a bait bet or what, but they've been below 500 in each of their last 4 seasons. Now, when you look back before that, the past 17 years, they had been bowl eligible in 15 of those last 17 years. That was prior to this very, very ugly half decade of playing under 500 and missing bowl games. This is Coach Brian Newberry's 2nd year, and they're going to have some pieces to replace. Quarterback is going to be the biggest question mark. You need a guy who can at least be adequate as a passer, relatively speaking, and a threat to run, obviously. Ty Lavatai has been with Navy for quite a long time when it comes to DFS, especially those showdown slates with Navy. We're always talking about him. He's got some nice plays under his belt, some highlight reel stuff. And Xavier Ireland, who has been there for a long time too. Both of those guys are gone. So for the first time in a long time, we're going to see quarterback play without those two there. Blake Woodson and Blake Horvath are both the two to look at. Horvath seems to have the fast track to the QB1 spot right now. Not super relevant there. Outside of some short slates, showdown slates, we're probably not going to be looking too much at Navy quarterbacks unless they're min-price. At running back, we have some intriguing options, though, and that is obviously where we always want to look when we get these service academy schools on slates. 750-yard rusher Alex Texa is back. Daba Fofana is back, 283 yards a season ago. And then you have 2 other kind of running backs by definition players, but also contributors as pass catchers. Eli Heidenreich, 19 catches, 382 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Also rushed for 214 yards and a touchdown. Definitely a certifiable weapon in this offense. And Brandon Chapman, 19 catches for 254 yards, also rushed for $160. So a couple of options there on this Navy team. It's a tough one because, again, they've been playing under 500 for 4 straight years. That 5.5 win total is tricky. I think Navy will be better this year. Looking at their schedule, it's not super easy, but it's not the most difficult schedule either. I think 6 wins is certainly possible there for Navy. All right, the North Texas Mean Green, coached by Eric Morris. The projection there is 5.5 wins. The last few years, North Texas has been a losing team, 6-7. They had a 7-7 in there. They haven't been great, but when it comes to fantasy, which we really care about, offensively, they've been a fun team. Ridiculously good, one might say. Defensively, not so good. They were the 6th most productive offense a season ago. You'd think a team like that could have a winning season. Perhaps not if their defense is giving up 40 points per game on average and finished dead last. Yes, that's right. Dead last in all of college football, the FBS level, dead last in yards allowed per game, meaning North Texas would get into shootouts, they couldn't stop anyone. Their offense was very productive. We like those type of teams, though. So maybe North Texas can continue to do that for us. Offensively, though, things look maybe a little bit bleak. They're going to have a lot to replace. Chandler Rogers kind of revitalized his career a bit there at North Texas. He's headed to Cal, so he's gone. 5 of their top running backs, yes, 5. This is a deep running back, a stable of running backs that the Mean Green relied on the last couple of years. They're gone. Top 5 running backs out the door. Most notably, Ayo Adeji. And then 3 of their top receivers, Jamari Macklin, gone via the portal, and then Roderick Burns, who's been around forever, 5+ seasons. He's out of eligibility. What do you want? He's gone as well. Now, it's not all horrible. Receivers going to be a tough spot. A lot of unproven talent there. At quarterback, they're bringing in Chandler Morris from TCU. Now, you might remember a couple of years ago, TCU outplaying their early season predictions, and they end up having themselves a dream season, right? End up playing for in the champ or the playoffs, almost out of nowhere. Horned Frogs football on the map, and it was supposed to be behind Chandler Morris. That did not happen. He got injured. He looked really good early on during that season, and what do you know? He got hurt, and they had to turn the time back and go with Hacksaw Max Duggan. And the dream season happened after that. Morris no longer wanting to stick around, time to do his own thing. He's been passed over too many times. TCU has other things, other plans. So he's headed to be the quarterback here of North Texas. And I do like that for him. I think statistically speaking, Morris can be a above average type of quarterback for sure. And I think in this offense in particular, he can be a very productive option for not only them, but us as fantasy players. Now, at running back, there are 2 players coming in via the portal. Zach Evans, not that Zach Evans, but Minnesota Zach Evans, who was coming on really kind of throughout the season there. It looks like he was going to be a really strong play. Now he's headed to North Texas. He'll be part of another kind of semi-committee there, even though they've lost 5 of their top guys. They're bringing in names, and they've got some dudes that can play. Juwan Price, formerly of Syracuse and New Mexico State. He's also going to be in the mix. And then Ikaikai Ragsdale, he rushed for 755 yards in 2022. He's been hurt. He missed most of last season because of those injuries. Hasn't been playing fully during the spring, so we'll see what happens there. But Evans and Price definitely going to factor into this. Now, I like Morris. I like Evans. I like Price. I would be a little higher on North Texas if they had some name value guys at the receiver spot. Now, they went to the portal, and they collected quite well. Dalton Carnes from Houston, Shane Porter from Rice. Those are 2 guys that are coming in. Carnes should be a relatively strong factor right away. And then the top, statistically speaking, returners, Damon Ward, who had 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Blair Conwright, 385 yards and 2 touchdowns a season ago. So it's not as if we're talking about a receiver room that has no talent at all or not some returning production. They definitely do. But I would be infinitely more excited about this North Texas projected total if Jamari Macklin was back or Roddy Burns found a way to get a 6th or 7th year of eligibility. Neither of those things happened, so life will go on. But I do think North Texas's offense will remain very high-powered, regardless of who's under center. And I do believe in Chandler Morris to a degree, but his receivers are going to have to prove to us that they can actually produce on a week-to-week basis. All right, the Rice Owls, coached by Mike Bloomgren, a projection of 6.5. So we're in the transfer portal era. You would expect, or you've come to expect at this point, that teams are just going to get gutted year in and year out. And I know a lot of people hate it. I've talked at length about transfer portal in both college basketball and how it relates to college football. I'm a big proponent. I know a lot of people hate it. I get it. One thing you have to be open to is just, rooting for your school or a team that you're excited about, that front name, not the back name necessarily. And I know sometimes it's hard to relate to a program when guys aren't coming back. And that's what a lot of people say. And if that's the case, and you're not a Rice Owls fan already, maybe you should be. Because they have somehow only lost a total of 3 starters on their team from last year. They're going to be truly elite defensively. I think Rice is going to be the top defense in this conference, and they've got some relevant options on offense, despite JT Daniels, who has been around forever. West Georgia, USC, West Virginia, final year in Rice last year. No more eligibility. He's gone. But that's okay, because they have a guy who threw for 3,000 yards, or just about 3,000 yards a season ago, in E.J. Warner. Where did he play? Temple. What is Temple not known for doing? Well, lately winning games and putting points on the board, let alone having a quarterback that threw for 3,000 yards. So you take E.J. Warner and you insert him onto a Rice Owls team that has a fantastic defense, and he won't be asked to make these ridiculously crazy exotic throws. Just has to be solid, and he's capable. Like I said, if you could throw for 3,000 yards on the Temple Owls from the last half a decade, you can play football for a lot of teams. E.J. Warner, I like. A.J. Padgett as the backup last year threw for 700 yards and 8 touchdowns, so he'll be pressing Warner there, but I think this is Warner's job. Now, the option here with Luke McCaffrey gone to the professional level is Dean Connors. This is going to be the versatile weapon that we're going to be talking about a lot. He rushed for 770 yards a season ago and 7 touchdowns, but he also put 400 receiving yards on the table as well. Over 1,000 yards combined, all purpose. We like Dean Connors. He's that dude. And E.J. Warner will definitely be able to make those, short throws to Connors and just rack up the PPR love. Dean Connors is going to be a guy. At receiver, they've got to replace the 900 yards, nearly 1,000 yards left behind by Luke McCaffrey. They have 2 returners in particular to know: Landon Ransom Golez, 380 yards and 3 touchdowns a year ago, and Rawson McNeil, 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those guys will both see their numbers move up, especially here with E.J. Warner, who made Temple receivers, at least 4 of them last year, all eclipse 450 plus yards. And just think about how bad Temple's been and how awful they looked the last year or two. And think about, statistically speaking, E.J. Warner is really quite good for what the teams he's been on. So I do like this Rice team. I do feel like over 6.5 is the way to go there. The South Florida Bowl, 7.5 win projection, coached by Alex Golish. This is the spot. Byron Brown is a true dual threat. Now, the last couple of conference previews, we've been able to really harp about, hey, this guy's a dual threat. There's like 2 or 3 guys in each conference. Maybe not so much in the AAC, but Brown is going to be a flagship play whenever USF is on the slate. 3,300 passing yards a season ago, 26 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. But the kicker is he rushed for 809 yards, led the team in rushing yards, 11 touchdowns. We're talking about a guy who probably won't come into the season priced super high because it's USF. I don't know that the algorithm / pricing guys are really going to be that sharp with Brown. You're talking about a guy who may come into it at 6K, maybe 7K at the most, and can legitimately put 35 plus fantasy points on the board because of his elite dual threat upside. So Byron Brown is going to be a stud. They do have Naquan Wright back at running back. He rushed for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. He will be adequate, solid, definitely usable on a week-to-week basis. Kelly Joyner is back as the primary backup as well, kind of a min-price special. You'll know that name. At receiver, Sean Adkins. Now, I'm going to guess you don't really know a lot about Sean Adkins unless you are a South Florida fan or just really deep into the DFS world. We didn't get USF on like a ton of slates. We definitely did. But Sean Adkins, his stats are going to definitely speak to you and really kind of maybe make your jaw drop a little bit. 92 receptions a season ago, 1,054 yards, and 7 touchdowns. They did that almost kind of, quietly in a way. And he was the program's first ever 1,000-yard receiver. Now, USF had a 2 or 3 year hiatus in the mid 2010s. Financially speaking, their director shut them down because they didn't have the money. They came back into existence in 2017, and they've been a really quite a good program since. Now, Sean Adkins, like I said, first ever 1,000-yard receiver in the program. He caught at least 4 passes of 42 yards in every single game. Now, that stat seems made up, I know, but that's ridiculous. It's not. I double and triple checked it. 4 passes of 42 yards in every single game. Set season records for receptions as well at 92, because that's just a joke. That's an absolute joke. I would love to tell you he's going to repeat that. That might be tough, but at least he's going to have that continuity. Generally speaking, with Beer Brown, this is an offense that deserves respect. They also get their number 2 back in Mike Brown-Stevens, 350 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then a transfer from Purdue by the name of Abdur Rahman Yassin, 330 yards a season ago. A really solid group, over 7.5 wins. I think you have to. Offensively speaking, this is the team. Memphis, they're the team, but South Florida is the team right below them. Really, really big on South Florida. All right, Temple Owls. Speaking of Temple, we were kind of talking about them a little bit. They're projected at 2.5 wins. I am telling you right now, Temple, it's a struggle. Stan Drayton, this is year 3 for him. They have not been a competitive team at any point during his tenure. But again, E.J. Warner, productive. Dante Wright, Zay Baines, productive receivers that they've had. Joquez Smith, a productive running back. They've got guys who can play. They just don't put it all together. There's no consistency, and I don't know that Drayton's really going to be the man for the job. At quarterback, replacing Warner, not easy. Forrest Brock, little used QB3 last year, and then Evan Simon, the transfer from Rutgers. That's who they're going to be rolling out at quarterback. I'm not extremely high on Evan Simon by any means. Quarterback's going to be tough for Temple. I think it's really tough to sit here and say under 2.5 wins for any team is the right bet. But is there any confidence for me to take Temple for 3+ wins? Not really. We will be using Temple guys in DFS because their receivers were so cheap last year. I assume that's going to be the case. Dante Wright back, 39 catches, 507 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Zay Baines also back. These are min-price specials throughout the season. They got up to like 4.5, 4.7. Really cheap guys. Baines, 36 catches, 442 yards, and a touchdown a season ago as well. At running back, Joquez Smith, 325 yards. He's back. And then also a transfer from Maryland by the name of Antoine Littleton. Littleton showed some spunk, if you will, during his time at Maryland. No real opportunity for consistent carries. Production was sporadic, but definitely steps into a situation here with Temple where he should be able to get a lot of work. All right, moving on to Tulane, the Green Wave, 7.5 win projection. New coach, John Summerall. SuperShow favorite, Michael Pratt. He's back. No, I'm just kidding. He's off to the NFL. He got drafted in the 7th round. I love Michael Pratt. He was our guy. Pratt was like 4% owned every single week. I think there was maybe 2 weeks out of the last 2 or 3 seasons with Pratt where he ever saw any ownership above 10 or 11%. Really, really love and going to miss Michael Pratt, but it's okay. Their QB situation is in good hands. Definitely a battle. Backup Kai Horton is going to be fully in the mix. And then Oregon transfer Ty Thompson, who I really like. We've seen Horton in action at times last year. Pratt would get, banged up. He can definitely produce, but I think Ty Thompson might be the guy for this team. So excited to see how that happens. Now, there's going to be a lot of pressure on both guys. Tulane has won over 20 games in the last 2 seasons, 23 to be exact. So plenty of pressure for those guys to get, production there and wins. I do think it's a situation where both guys are good enough to push each other in a way that if Tulane falters early, say Ty Thompson wins the game, Tulane goes, 1-2 early or, throws a couple interceptions, doesn't look good, I do foresee a situation where Horton steps right in there and gets a chance to seize the gig, or vice versa. Horton starts, slow start, here comes Ty Thompson. And I think we could see that situation play out and transpire throughout the season. I don't know that, 2 games in, 3 games in, we're like, okay, we've got our quarterback, let's roll. I think it's a situation where both might play. And I know that's not what you want to hear when it comes to the game that we play in fantasy. But looking at both Ty Thompson and Kai Horton, this is going to be a very, very close race. It's early July, so a lot still to be determined. But as of right now, it's tough to call. The good news is their running back extraordinaire, Mekhi Hughes, will be back. Nearly 1,400 rushing yards last year, 7 touchdowns. Remember, Mekhi Hughes was ridiculously underpriced for the first 6 weeks of the season. It took people a while to figure out who he was and what the hell was going on. But when they did, he was mega chalk every single week. You see a guy coming into the season with 1,400 yards, won't catch anybody off surprise. He's a big-time factor and will be another 1,000-yard rusher barring any injury. Now with Ty Thompson, who can be a dual-threat guy, that's going to definitely harm his overall upside. But we're still talking about a guy who is going to be, a 100-plus yard rusher, threat for 102 each and every game. At receiver, they do lose their top 3. That's tough, but that's not a death sentence for them because they do bring in Super Mario Williams, Oklahoma and USC. We know he's been productive at both stops. USC, Oklahoma, he kind of came on there late and really became a strong option. At USC, he had his moments, but what was the problem with the Trojans? Well, the depth of that receiver room. There were legitimately 9, 10, 11 guys getting targets. That's tough. Now he steps into a situation with Tulane where he can end his collegiate career and legitimately threaten to be a 1,000-yard receiver. I truly believe he's going to be an absolute monster for this team. And when you look at the current projected depth chart and how this pecking order is going to shake out, Mario should be the WR1. They also bring in an Alabama transfer by the name of Shaz Preston. Pedigree, yes, pedigree. And then their top returner, statistically speaking, the WR4 in the situation, Yule Keith Brown, who caught almost 400 yards last year. So even without Michael Pratt and, again, their top 3 receivers, that's guys like Jaquan Jackson, Craig Brazell, they're still going to be just fine. 7.5 wins is a little bit low, I think. I think we're talking about a team that should, get to the 9, maybe even 10 win mark here. If they're constantly going back and forth at quarterback, that's definitely going to harm them. But if they can settle into one of those guys, look for this offense and the defense for that matter to be a semi-juggernaut here. Still think they're behind USF and Memphis to be certain, but Tulane is definitely just a tier below. All right, the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes, 4.5 win projection. This is the second year on the board for Coach Ken Wilson. And what you need to know about Ken Wilson is that he is an absolute architect of the running game, an elite architect. Tulsa had the 7th highest rush rate in the country last season. They were in the bottom, 90th for running production. Before Wilson got on board, they were about 36th, 37th last year with Wilson. The good news is they do bring back their top 2. That's Anthony Watkins, who rushed for nearly 900 yards, and Bill Jackson, who rushed for just over 400 yards, both in place there. Watkins is your RB1, maybe like a 1A option there with Bill Jackson being the 1B, but Watkins is definitely the guy to own there in your dynasty and season-long type of leagues, which I see popping up all over Twitter right now. At quarterback, it'll be Cardell Williams and Kirk Francis competing for the job. We saw bits of them at times last year. Tulsa ran 4, I think at times 5 different quarterbacks got snaps for them last year. Not particularly excited about either. Cardell Williams has upside, but I think this is going to be a team that just continues to run the ball a lot. At wide receiver, the name to know there, Jeremiah Ballard, who transfers in from UTEP, a a productive PPR type of guy. North Dakota transfer Jack Wright, not that exciting. Only had 180 to 200 yards last year. Purdue transfer in Zion Steptoe, and then Camden Benjamin, their top overall returner, 47 catches, 727 yards, and 6 touchdowns a season ago. Definitely like Camden Benjamin there. Don't like his quarterback situation. All right. UAB, the Blazers, Trent Dilfer as the coach here. 6.5 win is their projection. I kind of him and hawed on this one because I want to believe in Dilfer and this UAB team, but when I look at the roster, man, it's barren offensively. Jacob Zeno returns, which is great. We've got a semi-dual threat in Zeno, 3,100 passing yards and 20 touchdowns a season ago. He also rushed for 4 different touchdowns, 168 yards, an adequate guy. And I think those rushing numbers could go up this year. Why do I think that? Well, this is going to be a Jermaine Brown-less year for us. Unfortunately, he is done. We know Brown, a versatile weapon, kind of a Blake Watson light. He could catch passes. He's just a tough runner, a guy that we could count on for DFS purposes. He's out the door. Lee Beebe, yes, that's right, Lee Beebe. He had 360 yards last year. He's in line there to get RB1 carries. Isaiah Jacobs, who rushed for 250 yards a season ago, right there with him. We'll see how that shakes out. Top receiver to John Palmer. He's gone as well. So you've got their top running back, top receiver, both out of eligibility / gone through the portal. Amari Thomas, 53 catches, 437 yards, and 3 touchdowns a season ago. There is upside there and continuity and a relationship with Jacob Zeno, as well as TJ Jones, who caught 15 passes for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amari Thomas should step up into that number 1 spot there, and again, has that continuity, that chemistry with Jacob Zeno. Should be a factor for sure. We'll see how all of it shakes out for UAB. I'm not feeling super confident with them. Trent Dilfer's first season with them didn't end up successful, but they did lose a lot of games by less than 2 touchdowns. They'll be close in games again. Can they close those games? That remains to be seen. A running back from the shadows is going to have to really step up in a huge way and be a Jermaine Brown-esque type of runner, and I'm not sure that I see that happening for the Blazers this year. All right, and lastly, an aggressive projection here for the UTSA Roadrunners. 8.5 wins. Now, that'd be fine if Frank Harris was back. And Coach Jeff Traylor definitely has UTSA in a position where they're going to win games and they're going to be competitive. But this is going to be the first time in, 4 years that they don't have Frank Harris milling around the roster, their leader. One of the best players in program history. I think that goes without saying. And if you're a Roadrunners fan, alum, the last few years, you've been truly spoiled because what's going to happen at quarterback this year is going to be a significant downgrade. No disrespect to Owen McCowan, but you're talking about losing a guy who rushed for over 2,000 yards, threw for just under 12,000 yards, and scored 120 total touchdowns across his career, breaking a absolute just vast array of records, school records for UTSA that won't be broken again anytime soon until we start running out like robot human hybrids. So that's a really tough situation to be in. You're also talking about Cephas, 1,000-yard receiver, being gone. There's a lot of juice taken out of this roster. So 8.5 wins to me, I don't know that that's going to be possible. Surely it's possible, but I don't feel great about it. Owen McCowan threw for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. We saw him at times last year because Frank Harris got banged up. The way he plays, he just ended up injured more times in the latter half of his career for whatever reason. So McCowan has that experience, and he definitely produced admirably. Kavarian Barnes will be back as the RB1, 750 yards and 6 touchdowns a season ago. We know Barnes has had his own injury issues at times. And then receiver-wise, they're going to really need DeCorian Clark to come back healthy, ready to go, and taking the WR1 job by the horns and running with it. Now, it's been 2 years since Clark's really like played in any significant games or been relevant for DFS. Played all but 2 games last year, and he was massively injured for, leaving those 2 games. In the end of 2022, he tore his MCL, ACL, LCL, ZZL, XSCL. I'm making those last 2 up. Like, he absolutely just shredded everything in his knee. So, and he was on his way. Back-to-back years in 2021 and 2022, over 700 receiving yards. And that was as a WR3 on a roster. Here, let me pull it back up. UTSA had basically one of the best receiver rooms in the country for the last 2 or 3 years, right? Maybe not so much last year because, they lost some guys. But looking at it, let's pull this up. Joshua Cephas, 1,200 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. Tyke Kellogg, 575 yards, 7 touchdowns. And Devin McQuinn, who is back, by the way, 546 yards, 3 touchdowns. More on McQuinn in a minute. Pulling up the 2022 receiver room, which was just God tier. Zachary Franklin, who we know transferred into the SEC, had injuries, didn't produce anywhere near what he did in 2022 for the Roadrunners, but 94 catches, 1,100 yards, and 15 touchdowns. Cephas, 87 catches, 985 yards, 6 touchdowns. And DeCorian Clark, 51 catches, 741 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So the WR3 on a team loaded, a receiver room like that, still producing those numbers. They also had Oscar Cardenas on that team, who was really productive in his own right. And Clark played, 4 less games because he got hurt after week 9 and could not finish the season for them. Otherwise, he probably would have been a 1,000-yard receiver there as well. Then we go back to 2021. Let's pull it up. Zachary Franklin, another 1,000-yard receiver. We see you, Zachary. Joshua Cephas, 803 yards. And then DeCorian Clark in 14 games compared to 9 the next year, 52 catches, 755 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So you're dealing with an absolute certifiable star who no longer has to deal with sharing targets with Josh Cephas and Zachary Franklin. Is he going to be fully healthy? Maybe. Is he ever going to be the same level of receiver again? Hopefully. I'm definitely worried, but he's not going to be playing with Frank Harris. Defenses are going to be game planning, paying attention to him primarily. It's going to be a lot different world out there for DeCorian Clark. So talent's obviously there. They need him at full strength. He can be a 1,000-yard receiver for this team. I am very interested in Devin McQueen. 42 catches, 546 yards, and 3 touchdowns a season ago, and basically became the de facto WR3 because of the Clark injury. Now he gets a chance to step in as the WR2, and we know when this offense is operating at peak optimal levels, it can support 3 different receivers at 700-plus yards. I don't think they're going to be that deep this year, so if Clark is good, we'll see him hit 1,000 yards, and we'll probably see Devin McQuinn hit somewhere between 750 and 900 yards. But Owen McCowan is definitely going to have to make me a believer. I'm not a believer right now, and it's just a really trash thing for him. And it's, like I said, no disrespect, but he's stepping into the biggest of shoes that he can't possibly fill. You're talking about a all-time player, record-breaking type of quarterback that is just, he's not that guy. And it's unfair to have to compare him to that, but that's basically what we're going to be dealing with. And every bad game that McCowan has, it's going to be like, damn, it's too bad that Frank Harris isn't here. And it's going to create trust issues for us as DFS players. So I'm going to be taking more of a wait-and-see approach with UTSA for sure. 8.5 wins to me feels pretty aggressive. I think they're clearly below the Tulane, Memphis, USF group to me. I think that's probably one that I wouldn't touch as any bet, but if I was, it would be the under. All right, so we're doing these preview shows highly efficient, by the way. So I want you guys to be able to go back and quickly check out each team preview as you want. So we're done with that. Pulling up here, conference winners, futures here on FanDuel. Memphis plus 210. I think they're going to win it handily. Tulane plus 430. And then you have UTSA at plus 480, which I just don't agree with. South Florida at plus 650. That is interesting to me. I think South Florida is better than UTSA. And I think that they will be kind of neck and neck with Tulane. It'll take a very disastrous season and really rotten luck for Memphis to not win this conference. But if they don't, I think South Florida is the next team to sneak in there. So there's some value to be had, a little sprinkle, if you will, on plus 650 on South Florida. I do really like that, and I'm extremely high on that team compared to obviously what it looks like to be Vegas and the rest of the public. Contrarian at heart. Rice, East Carolina, the rest of these teams we don't really have to talk about, plus 1,500. That's great, but they're not going to win. So South Florida at plus 650. That's the secret squirrel play future that I feel pretty good about. But just know that Memphis is probably going to win this conference. They're going to win 11 games, and they're going to go to the 12-game play or the 12-team playoff. That is a near guarantee. Matter of fact, let's look at to make the CFB playoff. Let's see what Memphis odds are here. See what they can give us. Plus 550. It's almost better to just bet that, right? More value, but I was hoping for a little bit like plus 800 or something. But I guess it seems like they're just the lock button team from the conference there to get in. So there you have it. Memphis at plus 550 to make the CFB playoff. If you think South Florida wins the conference and makes the playoff, it's plus 2,000. Then it gets really, really interesting. Same odds as Colorado, South Carolina, and Florida, for what it's worth. All right, that will wrap up the SuperShow AAC preview. I will be back next week. We will get into those real power conferences. We're going to be next week diving into the SEC. Might be thinking, why am I not saving them for last? Because I'm a Washington Husky fan. We're going to be talking about the Big Ten. That's going to be our take-home show. Before we get into our last preview, which will be the Big Ten show here in a couple of weeks, then I'm going to be doing betting special, which is going to be predictions, conference winners, Heisman winners, all that kind of stuff, betting-centric show. And then when that week 0 slate drops, you can rest assured we will be breaking that down in full, top to bottom, all the angles, everything, looking for that Nick Nash special multi-touchdown game that we got last year. We'll find it. It exists. Please keep supporting the Super Show. Please keep supporting FTN. I appreciate you guys so much hanging out with me all summer. We've got just a few weeks left. We're almost there. Let's get it. Until then, TBT, the Olympics, Summer League, lots of stuff. The WNBA still going on. Lots of opportunities to pad that bankroll. Right now, you can hang out with me in the WNBA betting channel of the FTN Discord, teaching those guys about tilt. It's been a blast. Thanks, everybody, for your continued support. Make sure on the way out, if you're watching on YouTube, you hit that like button and subscribe. If you're on Twitter, sharing the link helps just the same. Take care, guys. We're out of here.